I used to think neighbors were just people who lived next door, nothing more. You said hello, maybe borrowed salt once in a while, and that was it. But sometimes, life decides to show you that the person living 10 feet away from you might know more about you than even your closest friend. I realized this in the most terrifying way possible, and honestly, even now, years later, thinking about it makes my skin crawl. My life back then was pretty normal. I had moved into a small rental house after getting out of a long relationship. I wanted peace. I wanted quiet. Something about that small neighborhood made me feel like I could finally breathe. It was a street where everyone waved at each other, kids played outside, and old ladies watered their flowers every morning like it was some kind of ritual. It felt safe. Almost too safe. I remember the first time I noticed my neighbor. He lived alone in the house to my right. The house looked much older than the others, like it belonged to a different time. The curtains were always half closed, and most days I didn't even hear any sound coming from inside, not even a TV or music. I thought maybe he worked night shifts or just liked being alone. Honestly, I didn't think too much about it at first. But one evening, I was bringing groceries from my car when I noticed him standing in his yard. I looked over casually, like anyone would, and I saw him staring right at my front door, but the weird thing was, he didn't move his head when I turned toward him. His eyes were fixed, almost like he didn't even notice I was there. I actually turned around just to make sure he wasn't staring at someone behind me, but there was no one else. I tried ignoring it. People stare sometimes. Maybe he was just spaced out. And honestly, I didn't want to make assumptions. I forced myself to smile and waved a little. He didn't wave back, didn't even blink. He just slowly turned and walked inside. That night, I kept thinking about it. Was he just socially awkward? Maybe shy. I tried to convince myself that not everyone is friendly, and that was fine. But after that day, little things began happening that I just couldn't ignore. The next morning, I found a note taped to my mailbox. It wasn't in an envelope, just a piece of paper folded in half. I opened it, expecting maybe a neighborhood welcome message or something like that. But the handwriting was shaky and small, and all it said was, "I've been watching." I actually laughed a little because I thought it might be a prank from local kids. The words felt creepy, sure, but also just ridiculous. I threw it away and didn't give it much thought. But looking back now, that was the first warning. I just didn't take it seriously. Over the next few days, I started noticing lights coming from his house late at night. Not normal lights like room lights, no. It was a flashlight, moving around inside slowly as if someone was searching for something. Every night, same time, like 2 in the morning. Sometimes, I'd peek out my window and see shadows moving across the curtains. I told myself maybe he was just restless or couldn't sleep. But deep down, something felt wrong. About a week later, while I was cleaning the kitchen, I noticed movement through the window. I looked up and froze. He was standing in his own backyard, but instead of facing his own house, he was facing mine. And he wasn't doing anything, just standing there. It was dark, so at first I thought maybe I was seeing something wrong, but when I leaned closer, I could clearly see the shape of him. That night, I barely slept. I kept feeling like someone was watching me, even when the blinds were closed. It got to a point where I started checking every lock in the house before going to bed. And every night, without fail, I'd hear slight noises, like footsteps on gravel, or someone shuffling near my fence. But whenever I looked outside, there was no one. Then one evening, something happened that made my stomach drop. I went outside to put trash in the bin, and when I lifted the lid, there was a photograph inside. A printed one. Not just trash or random paper, a picture of me. Taken from behind. I was in my kitchen, pouring coffee. It looked like it was taken through my window. I can't even describe the feeling I got. My hands literally shook. I grabbed the picture and looked all around my yard, trying not to freak out. My first thought was someone was playing a sick joke, maybe some teenager messing around. But the angle of the picture, someone had to be really close to my house to take it. That night, I sat inside with all the lights off, just watching out the window. Minutes felt like hours. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard a faint tapping sound at one of the windows. Not loud, just a soft tap, like someone lightly touching the glass. I froze. I didn't move. I just listened, and after a few seconds, I heard another tap. this time a little louder. I walked slowly toward the sound, trying to stay quiet. My heart was beating so hard I felt like whoever was outside could hear it. When I finally reached the window, I hesitated before pulling the curtain slightly to the side. And that's when I saw him, standing just inches away on the other side of the glass. His face barely visible in the dark, but I could see his eyes. Wide, staring straight at me. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak. Just stood there, watching me. I stumbled back so fast I almost fell. My mind went blank. Should I scream? Should I call the police? What was he even doing at my window? I rushed to grab my phone, but by the time I went back to look again, he was gone. Just gone. I remember calling my best friend after that. It was late and she was half asleep, but when I told her what happened, she actually drove over and stayed with me. She tried to calm me down, saying maybe he was drunk or confused. Maybe he mistook my house for his. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't just some accident. The next day, I finally decided to confront him. I walked over to his house and knocked on the door. At first, there was no sound. I waited, knocked again. Eventually, I heard footsteps approaching, but the door didn't open. I could hear someone breathing right behind it though. Like they were standing right there. Listening. I said, "Hi, I just want to talk for a second." Silence. No movement. Nothing. After a few seconds, I started feeling stupid. I mean, what was I expecting? I left and walked back, feeling more uncomfortable than before. But that night, things got worse. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. It wasn't tapping this time. It was more like something scraping the outside wall of my house. I stayed completely still, listening. The scraping continued slowly, almost like someone dragging something metal across the siding. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. While waiting, I peeked out from behind the curtain, very carefully this time. I didn't see him outside the window, but I could definitely hear footsteps. My heart started racing again. I felt like I was being hunted. When the police arrived, I heard them knock on my neighbor's door. A few minutes later they came to mine and said nobody answered next door. They looked around but said they didn't find anything. They told me to call if anything else happened. Then they left. That didn't make me feel any better. The next morning, I decided to install cameras outside my house. And that's when I noticed something new. Right under my bedroom window, someone had carved small lines into the wall. 5 lines, like tally marks, fresh, like done recently. That feeling, it's hard to describe. But imagine someone marking the outside of your house, like counting something. Counting nights, counting visits. For the next few days, nothing happened. No tapping, no scraping, no pictures. It actually made me nervous because silence suddenly felt more threatening than noise. Like he was planning something. About a week later, around midnight, I got a motion alert from the new camera. I opened the app immediately. The camera showed him, standing in my driveway, staring at my house again. But this time, he wasn't wearing a shirt, and his face looked strange, almost like he was smiling, but not a normal smile. A slow, unsettling grin. And then he did something I'll never forget. He lifted his hand, and waved at the camera. Slowly, as if he knew I was watching him from the app. I froze. I couldn't breathe. The next morning, I found another note taped to my door. Same handwriting, same shaky letters. It said, "You shouldn't have moved here." I moved out 2 days later. Packed whatever I could and left that place behind like my life depended on it, because honestly, I felt like maybe it did. The police later told me they visited his house, but apparently, he had disappeared. The house was empty, no furniture, nothing. Like no one had lived there at all. The landlord claimed he had never rented the house to anyone recently. Sometimes late at night, even now, I still wonder if he was really gone, or if he was following. I mean, what kind of person stands outside someone's window without saying a word? And more importantly, what did he want from me? Maybe, I never really found out the truth. There's something really strange about the feeling of safety. You think once you move away from danger, everything will be normal again. That's what I believed. After leaving my old neighborhood, I felt relieved. A new apartment, new surroundings, more people around me, everything looked better. Even the sound of cars passing at night made me feel less alone. But trauma doesn't leave with the house you moved out of. Sometimes, it follows quietly, like a shadow waiting for the right moment to show itself again. The new apartment was on the second floor of a small building. My neighbor across the hall was an older woman who always smiled whenever she saw me. She gave off a warm, grandmother type of energy. The kind that makes you feel like nothing bad could ever happen near her. I remember telling myself, finally, a normal place. But deep inside, I was still uneasy. I kept my curtains closed most of the time. I checked locks before sleeping. I even bought a little door alarm just in case. My friends kept telling me I needed therapy, but I thought time alone would be enough. I thought distance was all I needed. The first week went by quietly. I started sleeping better, cooking again, listening to music like I used to. Life began feeling okay. Until something happened that I didn't expect at all. One evening, while cleaning the living room, I heard someone gently knocking on my door. Not loud, just soft taps, like someone was being polite. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I walked over and looked through the peephole. It was the old lady from across the hall. I opened the door smiling, trying to be friendly. She asked if I could help her carry her groceries from downstairs. She didn't have a lot, but I didn't mind helping. She thanked me, invited me in for tea, but I politely refused because I was tired. A simple interaction, completely normal. But that night, when I closed my bedroom door, I felt a weird sensation again. Like someone was observing me. It was a stupid thought, but my body reacted instantly, my stomach tightened, and I suddenly felt cold. I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe I had gotten too used to danger. Days passed and slowly, I started talking to my neighbor more. She was friendly, always asking if I needed anything. She lived alone since her husband passed away a couple years ago. She cooked a lot and sometimes offered me homemade food. I liked her kindness, but sometimes I felt she asked too many personal questions. Things like where I worked, what time I usually came home, and if I slept early or late. I thought she was just being curious. Old people love conversations, right? One night, around 10 p.m., I was watching a movie when someone knocked again. When I opened the door, she was standing there, smiling like usual. But her eyes looked different. Wide, like she hadn't blinked in a while. She asked if she could borrow sugar. I didn't have sugar, and that's when something clicked. She always baked, always cooked, she should definitely have sugar. I knew it was a small detail, but something felt off. I told her I didn't have any, and she just stood there a second too long before smiling and leaving. That night, I double-checked the locks again. Around 2:40 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Not from a noise, but from a feeling. It's weird how your body knows something before your mind realizes it. My heart started beating fast for no reason. I sat up and listened. Everything was quiet, too quiet. After laying there for almost 30 minutes, I finally got sleepy again. I slowly turned to face the wall, and that's when I heard it, soft footsteps. But not inside my apartment. Just outside my door. Slow, careful steps like someone was trying not to be heard. I froze completely. The footsteps stopped right in front of my door. Then I heard a tiny sound, like metal lightly touching the handle. Someone was checking my door at almost 3 in the morning. I grabbed my phone, but at that moment, I didn't want to move because I was scared that whoever was outside would somehow hear me. After a minute, the footsteps moved away, slowly, fading down the hallway. I barely slept after that. Every little noise made my heart jump. I kept thinking maybe it was someone else on the floor, maybe one of the neighbors, maybe someone drunk. I tried to convince myself, but deep down, that old fear came crashing back. The next morning, I opened my door and looked down. On the floor was a note. Folded, like the previous ones. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to touch it, but I forced myself. I opened it and read, "Why don't you sleep?" I felt dizzy. The handwriting wasn't shaky like the first guy's. It looked cleaner, almost neat, but the message was what scared me. How did they know I wasn't asleep? I started thinking maybe someone could hear me moving in my room at night. Thin walls maybe, but still, who would write that? I wanted to ask the old lady if she'd seen anything, but somehow, I felt uncomfortable talking to her now. Something about her had started feeling strange without me realizing it. Later that evening, I heard her talking loudly on the phone inside her apartment. Not angry, but worried. Something about keeping an eye I couldn't hear everything clearly, but the words kept repeating in my head. Keeping an eye on what? And why so late at night? A few days later, something happened that made everything worse. I was coming home from grocery shopping when I saw my neighbor standing in the hallway holding my spare apartment key. The one I kept in a small ceramic bowl near my entrance inside my apartment. She smiled politely and said, "Oh dear, you dropped this outside." But here's the thing, I never took that key outside. Not once. My hands started shaking. I forced myself to smile, thanked her, and took the key, but inside my mind, alarms were going crazy. Had she been inside my apartment? How? When? I immediately changed the lock that evening. I didn't care how much it cost. That night, I slept with the lights on. Around 3:15 a.m., I woke up again. I don't know if it was a noise or if my body was just trained to wake up at that hour now. But this time, I didn't hear footsteps. Instead, I heard whispering. Very soft, right outside my door. I couldn't understand the words, but it sounded like someone speaking quietly to themselves. I slowly got out of bed, walked to the door, and put my ear against it. The whispering stopped immediately. My heart dropped into my stomach. I backed away very slowly, not wanting to make a sound. I grabbed my phone and called the police. They came again, talked to the neighbors, including the old lady. I could hear her voice in the hallway, calm and innocent, acting like she knew nothing. The police didn't find anyone suspicious. They left after a short talk, telling me to stay safe. I started packing my things again. I couldn't live like this. I knew people would think I was paranoid, but how many coincidences could someone ignore? But the night before I planned to leave, something happened that I still don't understand completely. Around 4 a.m., I woke gasping like someone had shouted my name near my ear. My heart was racing. I sat up, confused and scared, and that's when I noticed movement outside my window. Someone was standing on the fire escape, right outside my bedroom window. Just standing there. I couldn't see who it was clearly because of the dark, but the shape looked familiar, small, hunched, like the old lady. But nothing made sense. Why would she be outside? I stayed in that frozen state for what felt like forever until she slowly turned her head toward the window. Not her body, just her head, like something out of a nightmare. I ducked instantly, scared she saw me. I didn't look again. I couldn't. I waited quietly until morning, sitting in the corner of my room with my phone in my hand. As soon as sun came up, I packed everything. Before leaving, I placed the spare key on her floor. I don't know why, maybe a message, maybe a warning. I moved out that same afternoon. But here's the part that really haunts me, even more than anything else. A week after I left, I got a call from the police. They said the neighbor across the hall, the old lady, had passed away. And according to them, she had been dead for at least 2 weeks. Which means, she died before I even moved into the building. So if she was dead already, then who was I talking to every day?